Welcome, everybody, to Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick. I'm Rick, and this is episode number 52 of season number 3. Unfortunately, today, due to unforeseen circumstances, Emily's not going to be able to join us. However, we have our guest today is Hannah Gleditsch, former police officer with Loveland Police Department here in Loveland, and now owner of Colorado Coffee here in Loveland. From the badge to the business. Welcome, Hannah. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, Hannah, could you give us the your background, a little bit of a bio, please?
Sure. So my name is Hannah. I have been raised in Loveland my entire life. I got on with the Loveland Police Department in January of 2017. I was one of the first recruits to be sent through the police academy. And I spent, let's see, how many years? About 8 years with the police department. I was a patrol officer, peer support team member. I was a SWAT operator and loved every second of my job, and unfortunately had to medically retire. And
Hmm.
I medically retired, let's see, I guess it would have been 2023. And I
Okay.
stayed on with the police department in a civilian role, part-time, and I did community engagement and public relations, social media and all that kind of stuff for about a year and a half until I transitioned out of the law enforcement world and purchased Colorado Coffee Company.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks for that. So, Hannah, growing up here, what drew you into law enforcement?
My husband's family is all firemen. My husband's a fireman for the city of Denver. My brother-in-law is with Loveland, and another brother-in-law is with Poudre Fire up in Fort Collins. So I've always been kind of around that. And then the one brother in my husband's family who didn't go into the fire service, he actually married a Fort Collins police officer. And so her and I met when we were each dating the brothers and immediately became friends. And she was kind of the person who got me interested in law enforcement, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to school to be a probation officer, spent a semester doing an internship with probation and realized how much I would hate my life if I stuck to that. And so I started thinking about different things I could do within the criminal justice field, and law enforcement's where I landed.
Yeah, that's in it. And one of your brother-in-laws was on my shift when I was
Yes,
with Love
sir.
on Fire.
And
Yeah,
he's a lieutenant now, unbelievably.
yeah, I don't know how many times, Hannah, I show up over there at Colorado Coffee, and I just get I start to chuckle, when I walk in, and I see the number of firefighters actually that
Oh, yes.
are in there. I've been in there one time when I seen a one of the police officers that I had, he was in the civilian clothes, and you know how it is when you see somebody in uniform all the time, and then now they're in street clothes.
Oh,
It's like,
yeah. You're like,
that's
do
who
I
I
know
think
you?
that is. But the other thing I'm laugh at too is one of your employees is married to a firefighter in another city.
Yep. We got to
Yeah,
keep that first responder love around.
yeah,
It's like it's like an
yeah.
addiction.
So, here, we're talking about leadership. And so, Hannah, what were a couple of the challenges you faced as a police officer?
You know, I think the biggest thing is, I was a police officer through 2020, through all the riots with George Floyd, through the introduction of Senate Bill, excuse me, 217 with law
Yeah.
enforcement, which created a lot of really good things for law enforcement, but it changed a lot as well, and it kind of started giving people in law enforcement this uneasy feeling of, what do you mean if I don't turn my body camera on, I could get charged because the assumption is that I'm lying about something and the assumption is I'm hiding something. Police all of a sudden became the bad guys. And so the
Mhm.
tables kind of turned, and, policing through COVID around that same exact time, it was just a weird world.
Hmm.
And I think that was honestly, for my career, that was probably the biggest struggles where, you get into this career where you want to be part of the community and you want to help and you want to serve. And then with COVID, I remember being told, like, unless it's a top priority in progress call, you don't go in person. And it was just such a mind game of like,
Mhm.
what do you mean?
Huh.
What do you mean I have to take this by phone? And it kind of takes that personal relationship out of things. And
Yeah.
so that was definitely a struggle. You know, and and again, just so much changed in those couple of years with with the way that people saw police officers in the culture, and it just started to become very toxic.
Hmm.
Um, my police department, Loveland, went through a really, really, really big public, horrible lawsuit. And that changed a lot too. And then I transitioned into doing, the community service side of things and in the community interactions, public relations, social media. And it's like I couldn't get out of that lawsuit. People would come from all over the country, all over the world to our social media and bring it up over and over and over and over again. And
Yeah.
at some point, it kind of holds you down, and you just aren't able to move on. And it's just tough mentally.
Yeah. Well, my brother at the time, he's in the ministry. He was in West Virginia, and I was on the phone talking to him, and he said, "Oh, I saw that on the news. That was there in Loveland." I said, "Yeah, yeah, it was." And for folks who you're listening, the public, fueled by the news media, has a fantastic skill of turning people against police officers. And we served right alongside of each other. And Hannah, I got to tell you, uh, I do not have the personality to be a police officer, even though in my crazy life there was one time I took the test for the Greenwood Village Police Department.
Wow.
Because I'm sure you heard it. You know, what do we say? Hey, cops want to be firemen and firemen want to be cops.
Exactly. Exactly. The grass is always greener.
Right, right. But as a side note, we at Loveland Fire had a very good working relationship with all you officers over there at LPD, and same thing with Larimer County Sheriff's Office. And through the years, when I first came on with Loveland Fire, our relationship with Colorado State Patrol was, eh, it was one of those get off the interstate, get off the interstate. But unfortunately, as we've seen so many times in Western culture, it takes a body count.
Oh yeah.
And, when a couple troopers were killed down just north of Commerce City on US 85, that changed their mindset to instead of get out of here, can you stick around?
Yep.
And the things that I saw that improved our relationship with PD were incredible. Yeah, uh, back, I believe it was 2006 when Mike Chard was the fire chief here and TAC Fire was created. Luke
Yep.
Hecker was still the police chief over there. And I saw initially, from the police side as what is this? What are these guys doing to, wow, how, now TAC Fire is integrated in with SWAT. And then also some of the things that I seen with the state patrol in my career, Hannah, 37 years in the fire service, I never ever thought that I would see police officers allowing firefighters to drive their vehicles, especially at the state level, teaching them how to mark and move vehicles off the interstate with their own patrol car.
Yep.
I mean, it's just absolutely, absolutely amazing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so you mentioned, what you had done, patrol, SWAT, working peer support, and you said you liked them all.
Mhm.
Is there any one of those that topped out about another, like, hey, I really like this
Oh,
one the
peer
best?
support. Peer support by
Peer
far.
support?
Peer
Yeah.
support. And it's funny because peer support is one of the reasons when I had retired and, hung up my badge and went from this full-time police officer role to a part-time civilian role. Peer support was one of the main reasons why I fought so hard to stay with
Mm.
the
Okay.
department in some kind of role. My heart belonged to the peer support team. They had gotten me through a lot of stuff. We had gotten each other through a lot of stuff. And um, it was just such a great program that
Yeah.
had been introduced. And at that time, mental health was something that was still very stigmatized. But we were starting to see this light at the end of the tunnel. And
Hmm.
it was so cool to be able to have a team of people that officers felt comfortable coming to, and then we could all rally together and think of ways, how can we help this person move forward. And you brought up the fire department and our collaboration with them. I think that was also one of the reasons why our departments worked so well together was because Dr. Teresa Richards, she's
Yeah.
our staff psychologist, and she also is the staff psychologist
Mhm.
for Loveland Fire. And so she has these two separate teams with both fire versus police, but it was not uncommon for us to do trainings together, for us to respond to calls together. We would debrief together, and it was just something that really bonded us. And, it's sad to say, but I know you'll understand, but it's like a trauma bond, you know. And so to have
Right.
the first
Yes.
responders all together in the room after something really, really bad happened, it just binds you for life, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Let's stop right there for a moment, Hannah, because you bring that up. And as time goes by, I'm finding out that more and more people who are not fire are listening to this,
Okay.
including some police officers are listening. And I even ran into a lady at church yesterday that my wife introduced me to, and she says, "Oh, I like listening to the podcast that you and Emily are doing."
Oh,
So
cool.
we have people that aren't even in emergency services. So for those folks, what you just said, it's probably really strange to them
Hmm.
that they don't understand. And they just, we collectively on scene together see the same things, and then separately, you and law enforcement see things different that we didn't see because we're not on scene, and then likewise we're seeing things from a fireside that PD didn't see
Hmm.
because they're not on scene. But there is that bond in there. And one of the other things too that's inherent to people who work in emergency services is the dark humor.
Yes. So I'll apologize for all non-first responders listening.
I I was telling a friend of mine, I do a weekly accountability meeting with two other guys on Monday mornings, and one of them couldn't be on there, but the fellow I was talking to, he was out of state, and he was asking me some questions, opinions about, some of the things that are taking place around the country. It somehow came up about a psychologist that the fire department brought in way back in the early 90s. And he went around and interviewed all three shifts. And then when he brought our shift together, the one that I was on, he was telling us in his Austrian accent how messed up that we were, and that we were the worst shift with
Oh
black
no.
humor, and this must stop right now. And I made the comment. I says, "You don't know what we do. You don't know what we face." And one of the other guys who'd been around a long time says, "Ah, don't worry about it, Davis. That guy is just screwing the city out of $30,000. He doesn't care about us."
Yeah, he's getting his check and he's hitting the road.
That's right. That that's right. Hannah, for those folks who are not fire, police, EMS, could you explain a little bit more what peer support is so they have an understanding?
Yeah, so the way that Loveland ran the peer support team, again, it was all run under our staff psychologist, Dr. T. So she kind of was the head of everything, if you're looking, as far as a chain of command. And then we would have a team leader who was, just somebody who had been part of the team for a long time. When I was on the team, it just happened to be a sergeant, but it's,
Mhm.
I don't believe that rank was required to be a team leader. And our team had, gosh, I want to say like maybe between 15 and 18 people who were both
Okay.
born and civilian. So we had people from dispatch, from records,
Mm.
officers, SROs, different ranks, all different kind of walks of life who were part of the peer support team. And you went through an interview process with members of the team, kind of talked about what you brought to the table, why the team was important to you. Then you'd go to, once you got selected, you'd go to a 40-hour training, which a lot of that was just covering confidentiality.
Mm.
It kind of turns into a tricky territory when you're talking to people about very confidential things. And
Mhm.
that is part of why I think mental health in our fields is very stigmatized. People get super
Yeah.
scared to be honest about the way that they're feeling about things and the
Mhm.
way they've been affected by things. They get scared that they're going to put into a box. Um, and so that training was really, really important. And then we would have monthly trainings, a couple hours every single month where we'd all come together and we would have guest speakers come in. We would go to conferences. But the big thing is anytime our department or Loveland Fire would go on a call that was categorized as, being traumatic or very emotional, it would start a response for the peer support team to start checking in. And a check-in could be as simple as, we get a page saying, hey, something as small as, you get reached out to by Dr. T and she says, hey, I've got this person, who's kind of struggling with something. Do you mind reaching out to them? And then you and this other person kind of go off and you have your own relationship and connections and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or it's as big as there's a really big scale call going on. I need
Mm.
it's an all call. So everyone stop what you're doing, come to the police department, whether that be an officer involved shooting, or just a very, very traumatic call that a lot of
Yeah.
people are involved
Yep.
in. And you stop and you just go and you wait for somebody to tell you what they need from you.
Yeah. Um, when you're talking about that, I was thinking back, and I'm going to be very generalized with this because I don't know, even though this occurred back in 20, I believe it was 2018. Now that I was on scene, it was a mutual aid call. It turned out to be a regional incident. Might be one that you're even familiar with, but I'm going to be generalized with it because of some of the fallout that came. But I was a support officer for the incident commander, and as I saw, how things were unfolding, I called over here to Loveland Fire, and the captain that was on duty at Station 6 was in charge of peer support, and I said, "Hey, we need you guys. We need you over here." And so he got a couple team members mobilized, and they came. And also, what was helpful is PFA Poudre Fire brought down that bus, that converted bus that they were using, and they brought down some people too. So, we could have peer support right there on scene at the time because, yeah, it was ultimately it was a tragedy incident that had occurred that had a great big impact on all of us that were there psychologically. And I'll share this with you and with the listeners. My mother-in-law lived over in that community, and for 6 months, Hannah, I could not drive into that town like I normally did. I had to go around. That's how much that bothered me, that
Yeah, I believe
particular
it.
incident. Yeah. So for those of you who are not in emergency services, these things have a cumulative effect on all of us. And it's like I had shared with the current fire chief, Hannah, that these are things that come up several years later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, several years later. And so you mentioned too the stigma. I had a conversation with Teresa when I was still on, and she had mentioned, and I was well aware of this, as part of the command staff, that Loveland Fire had offered office space over there. And she said no. And she told me the reason I said no, Rick, is because I knew none of you guys would show up in a fire station if I had an office there.
Yep.
And it's the truth.
Yep. And
No,
her office is at the PD now.
yeah.
And even to make it worse, it's upstairs where all the chief's offices are,
By the
and
training
so
room too, right?
yes, and right, yes, exactly. But that's been one thing that's been so cool to watch transpire over the years is that people used to be like, okay, how can I kind of sneak in, sneak out? And now you'll run into people in the hallway on their day off, and you're like, hey, what are you doing here? And they're like, oh, I'm just going to see Dr. T. And I'm like, good for you, So the more encouraging you can be to people, the better off it will turn out.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's interesting and neat that you do that here towards the end of 2025. And this interview was broken up into a part one and part two. His name's Arjuna George. He is a retired fire chief out of British Columbia. He's written a book called Burn Around the Edges. And he's got a podcast called Beneath the Helmet, and he really addresses quite a bit from the mental health aspect for fire police and EMS. If you get a chance, you might enjoy listening to what, yeah, he had to say. You can go back and listen to that.
Awesome.
I forget what episode numbers they were, but they're pretty easy to find, and also because this not only gets posted up, through Apple, iHeartRadio, and Spotify, but I have a YouTube channel, so the video gets posted up there. So it's pretty easy to go back and find those. So with leadership, we'll make a transition here. I'm going to use this as a transitional thing. What did you see as a leadership challenge as a police officer?
Oh boy, let's see here. I was actually very blessed in my career to always have leaders surrounding me who were very supportive. Um, I always had sergeants that I loved and I trusted, and the further you get in your career, you get the seniority and you can start to bid your shift and bid your supervisor and all that kind of
Uh-huh.
stuff. But even right there in the beginning, when I was just, super low man on the totem pole and I was working night shift and, hoping for the best, I had a fantastic sergeant who was my very first ever boss. And to this day, he's still one of my number one mentors in life.
No,
His name's
cool.
Matt Roberts. He's a lieutenant now.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
he's been around forever. You probably know him.
Yeah.
I look up to that man in every aspect of his life with parenting, relationships, friendships, law enforcement. He's a very strong Christian. He actually baptized me this summer.
Oh,
So yeah,
cool.
so he was awesome. He kind of set the groundwork for what my expectations were for supervisors moving forward. And
Nice.
you know, I also kind of just stayed under the radar though. Like I wasn't the kind of person who was going out and, walking the line of can I get away with it even though I shouldn't? Kind of that's just not me. I'm very much a rule follower. And so
Mhm.
I never really found myself, in a hot seat by any means.
Hmm.
But again, going back to how things all kind of started to transpire around 2020, 2021, I felt bad for our leadership and our supervisors because they got put into a really, really weird spot, especially
Yeah.
right when all those transitions started to happen because it's like you woke up one day and there was new rules and it's like, hey, you better hold your officers accountable starting
Mhm.
at 8 a.m. today. And that's a really tough pill to swallow. That's a huge change
Yeah.
right away. But it was also at that point that I said, I'm never going to promote in my entire life. And I never wanted to. I never wanted I didn't want to have the stripes or the stars or any of that kind of stuff because I didn't want the liability. I wanted to just go out and do my job and be one of the guys and take care of my city, but I did not want all the extra stuff that came with it um, for those reasons.
hmm There is a lot that goes with it. And what you just said there is also common in the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of an individual who came on the department just a few months after I did. And he was an acting officer for quite a while. And after a while, he just said, Hey, Chief, he says, I'm going to let my fire officer certification expire. I'm not interested in this. I don't want anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, because there are additional headaches that come with it. Every time you go up in rank, there's additional headaches. Plus, Hannah, what I would tell the people on the shift or anybody who sits down with me now, and they're considering, a promotion, I says, hey, the target gets bigger. And
Yeah.
like I met recently at Colorado Coffee with a fellow, and I says, "Hey, the target gets bigger." And he says, "What do you mean?" I says, "Every time you step up one rung in the promotional ladder, that target on your backside gets bigger, and it gets easier for people to target you and attack you and find fault with you."
Mm-hmm. Which
And
is
so,
so hard because the I don't want to separate command staff and normal line level people, and
mhm,
say like the good guys versus the bad guys. But
right,
anytime that there is a leadership challenge that the entire agency is, dealing with or suffering from, or something like that, it's the cops who are just on the street or the firemen who are just on the street that have these really great ideas. They're amazing leaders, whether they're promoted or not. And you're thinking, yes, you're the one that needs to go up. You need to make these changes.
hmm
And exactly what you just said, like there's all these targets and okay, if you promote, but so there's
yeah,
all these just negative things that appear to come with it. And unfortunately, I think it stops a lot of really good change from ever being affected because those people are like, I don't want to put my life or
right.
my career on the line and hope to make some change when I might just end up getting a target put on my back instead.
Right. And as we have seen in our own community from some of the lovely individuals who sit on city council,
Mm-hmm.
that where they have targeted more, a lot more from the police side
Oh yeah.
than the fire side. And I will I had the opportunity to hear Chief Duran speak a few months through the Kingdom Way Ministries Work
Mm-hmm.
Life Connect. And that was the first time I met him. And we had a brief conversation out in the hallway. And I admire that man for the stand he takes for, his belief in Christianity and the Bible and standing for Christ. And because there's a lot of people that attack that he came under a couple of years ago, they would have either folded or they would have said, "Aye, aye, ma'am, sir, I will never
Yep.
say anything again." But I appreciate the fact that he has the intestinal fortitude and the character and the belief in Christ to the point that no, this is who I follow. And then you may have seen this in our local newspaper, the Distorter Herald, last week when one of the school board members made a comment at a school board meeting that bases her decisions and she uses the Bible and the Constitution as a guide, and immediately she's coming under attack.
Mhm.
And, and so, yeah, those things definitely come along with moving further up, and it does hinder good people
Yeah.
from moving into those positions.
It's interesting though, you bring up Chief Duran, and I know exactly what incident you're talking about from a couple of years ago, because my office was upstairs with
Yeah.
him when that whole thing happened. And again, I was doing PIO stuff and social media stuff. And I just remember thinking, what a stretch. Like, what a stretch for
Hmm.
this man to be invited to a leadership speaking engagement off duty, not as the chief of police, but as Tim Duran, and then just to get lit up for happening to be, a Christian, but also being the chief of police at the same time. And people
Yeah.
started saying, the craziest stuff. And that actually kind of helps push me forward when it comes to how I run my coffee shops now, and I
Mm.
know that you're very familiar with, and the previous owner started this, which, I was very grateful for. And I think her and I kind of meshed because of this, but our goal is to run Colorado Coffee Company as a Christian coffee shop.
Yeah.
Um, that is one thing, if you ask me characteristics about the shop, the three things I'm going to say is that we're Christian, first responder owned, and female owned. And those are my
Mm.
top three priorities that I want people to know about the
I like
shop
that.
and about me and about my family. But those instances like what you were just talking about with Chief Duran getting put through that, it almost builds more fire behind me to be like,
Yeah.
I have this freedom now. I can go out. I'm not tied down by the police department. I'm not tied down by the city of Loveland. I am my own person. I can go make whatever changes I want, whatever
Hmm.
rules I want. And I don't have to be quiet for anybody. And I'm not going to, which is why I run a Bible study 2 days a month out of the Foundry location, because we want to
Okay.
spread the word and get like-minded people in the door and help to try to bring more people closer to Jesus. And if that happens to be done over coffee and a cinnamon roll, then that's beautiful.
Yeah. Did Hannah, did you use your police skills and pick up on something here, either in my tone of voice or my questioning, to know that that's exactly where we were going to go
I sort of
next?
figured.
Yeah, is right to because I wanted to because my very next question that I wanted to ask is what what skills did you bring over from the police department now into the business world? And could you just touch a little bit on what brought you into the business world?
Sure. So, um, my old position with the police department, part of my role was to, build these community engagement, events, all that kind of stuff. So I had to reach out to Stacy, the previous owner of the coffee shop, about doing coffee with a cop at the Foundry
Hmm.
location.
Okay.
And we ended up getting that on the books. Her and I, emailed back and forth. We kind of got to know each other. And it was probably, I don't know, 6 months later, I happened to be in the shop getting a cinnamon roll for my son's birthday. And she just happened to be working that day. I think this whole story is just very like, you can't deny this was God 100%.
Mhm.
The owner of the shop just happened to be working that day, and she struck up conversation with me and told me that she was looking at either closing the doors or selling the shops. And she ended the conversation with me by saying, if you know anyone who wants to buy a coffee shop, have them call me. And I walked out thinking, like, I'm surrounded by cops and firemen. Like, we're not smart enough to run a business. We don't have money to run a business. Like, sorry, I'm not going to be helpful. And it was probably about 6 weeks later. I could not stop thinking about it and I couldn't
Mm.
stop dreaming about it and how fun life would be and how freeing life would be, to have a small business and to be able to do what you want to do and make the changes you want to make. And so I had called her and I said, "Hey, nothing for nothing. What are you looking at as far as like basically what's your price?" And I had done a bunch of research and created a number in my head. And she came back to me with something significantly lower than what I
Mm.
had created in my head, which honestly I pulled out of thin air, let's be real. Um, and it became real all of a
Mm.
sudden. And I'm like, okay, let's meet. And I met with her. I dropped my kiddo off at his first day of kindergarten, and I turned around and went and met with her at the shop. And within 2 months, I was signing paperwork.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. And hey, I want to make a comment about the cinnamon roll because you said you picked up a cinnamon roll for your son. And for the people, hey, you're in northern Colorado or even southern Wyoming, you need to come. And that cinnamon roll that Hannah was talking about, yeah, they're huge. I'll buy one and share it with my wife and daughter. And
Yeah.
they are
Not
the
the size of your
best.
face.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, they are the absolute best. And cinnamon. And I've felt that way for a long time. The best cinnamon rolls in the area.
Well,
So
thanks.
I would imagine. I know it's dangerous to make assumptions, but I would imagine that a lot of the things that you were doing as a PIO were transferable now to Colorado coffee.
Yeah, and honestly, patrol work too. It's, the thing that I missed the most when I had to medically retire was feeling like I wasn't serving the community.
Mm.
And that was something that even in the work that I was doing with PIO and all that kind of stuff, I was still out in the community a ton. I was at all the community events and I loved being part of that, but it just feels different. And when you go from being in the uniform with the cool black and white car and everyone wants to see your stuff to just being the person standing next to them, it's just really shoved in your face. Like that's not you anymore. That's not
Right.
your life anymore. And without going into too much detail, just for time's sake, my issue was that I was diagnosed with a medical condition that forced me to medically retire at 30 years old. And that
Mm.
was something that I never in a million years would have expected to happen, never something that I ever thought about. And so that kind of just came and smacked me right in the face. And I woke up one day going, I can't do this job anymore. And
Mm.
it's not by choice. And I think that was a super tough pill to swallow.
Yes.
But again, it goes back to I finally feel with the shops now that I'm serving the community again.
Mm.
And it's in a totally different way, but that is now being fulfilled within my heart again. And I don't know if that's just me making stuff up in my own head, but it just feels good again. Um, and so, I think that was a big part was serving, but also just communication and
Hmm.
being involved with the community. And I just love people. I love people. I love this town. Like I said, I grew up here. My husband and I met when we were in seventh grade and started dating when we were 18, and we've been together ever since. So we're high school sweethearts. We've got 2 kids. All of our families, both sides are here. And there's just something very special about this town, which, when I came into law enforcement, I was very, very specific on I don't want to go work anywhere else, because my
Hmm.
husband works for Denver, for the city of Denver, for their fire department. And I remember him saying, like, well, why don't you test for DPD? And I was like, no, I don't want to. And I remember him thinking, well, when I was testing for the fire department, like I was putting applications out everywhere. Like you should try to do the same. And I was like, no, if I'm going to put myself in a dangerous position and in a job that could take my life, like I'm going to do it for the town that I love. And that was my line in the sand. And, thankfully it all worked out the way that it did. But, having that connection to the community,
Hmm.
it's just something that money can't buy. And like I said, I feel like I have that back now with the shops, which is just such a blessing.
Well, that's great. And I understand completely where you're coming from because as I've been out doing trainings in fire departments, and inevitably somebody will raise the question, you're retired from the fire department. Why are you doing this? And my response is it's very similar to it's serving.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a family that has died off in their early 40s from cardiac events of one or the other. And God has blessed me and allowed me to live beyond that. And I'm a firm believer what Luke 12:48 says, to whom much is given, much is required. And to whom more is given, more is, expected. And as long as I'm walking and talking and breathing, I want to be able to take those experiences that I gained over all those years in the fire service and in the military and share that back into the fire world. And I've even had some law enforcement officers, because I still do hazmat training, and we've had some, they're primarily bomb squad people, that are showing up and that. But it's that same thing, service. And I don't believe, and I think you probably would be the same. Well, I like your friend there that just popped in.
I know, right?
For
I
folks
told
that
you
are
somebody was going to
listening,
come and interrupt us at some point
yeah,
today.
yeah, that was a four-legged friend
Just the puppy right
that
now.
just popped in. Yeah, it is. I don't believe in the Western version of retirement. You hit X age and you retire, and then you go sit down to Big Thompson River and fish or go hiking in the mountains. Especially for us as Christians, is God has allowed us to live and experience things, and your career coming to an end when you weren't expecting it. That's one of the things Arjuna and I talked about on the podcast is when it comes to an end. I thought, Hannah, that I was mentally prepared to walk away from fire, but here it is, a little over, well, about 5.5 years now since I retired from the fire department, and there's aspects of that I miss.
Hmm.
That's why you see me in the coffee shop for 4 hours with Shelby.
Yeah. Yep. I just had coffee this morning with two of my friends who are still at the police department.
Yeah, it's great. There's a camaraderie that comes with fire and police or emergency services as a whole, and in the military that is not. And I don't want this to come across for people who are not in these fields as being disparaging, for where you are working.
Right.
But when you are working in a high risk, dynamic environment that where you may not come home,
Hmm.
there's a camaraderie that gets built. So,
Absolutely.
Hannah, we've been going here for about a half hour now or so. Uh, I had an idea as you were talking about, leaving the police department, and I don't know if I'll be able to orchestrate this enough, but I would love to get maybe three of us, four of us on here who are no longer in emergency services and just talk about what the transition is like,
Oh yeah.
and then pass on some, hey, here's some tips for when your time comes.
Hmm.
Because unfortunately, well, I saw we were on duty and we were running an academy, and I was up station one, and they get on the radio down there and call for a med unit code 3 to the training area. And it's like, okay, you gotta get down there and find out what's going on. And one of the recruits carrying a victim down the ladder, she had lost her grip and she fell, I think it was approximately 20 feet, and pile drived her leg into the ground and broke her right femur.
Oh my gosh.
And I ran into her a couple of years later at a coffee shop in Longmont.
Oh
And she
wow.
told me, she says, I can't do it. Because of that injury, she says, I can never go back. And so
And
it's
that's
just,
what's interesting is
yeah.
you never know when it's your time. And I think that that is not only important for first responders, but for people in the private sector as well. We spend our whole lives working to retire,
Hmm.
and you have this plan in your head of, okay, I'm going to make it to 55, or I'm going to make it to 60 or 62, or whatever your age is, and that's going to be it. I never thought, like I said, that I was going to be 30 years old getting a lifelong changing medical diagnosis. Never in a million years. I
Hmm.
had thought before of, okay, I'm in a dangerous career. Yes, it's possible for me to get severely injured or killed in the line of duty. That was part of it. I had thought about it. I had accepted it. That's just, it was what it was. Never crossed my mind of what would happen if something happened off duty outside of
Hmm.
the job that
Yeah.
prevented me
Yeah.
from making it to that 55-year-old retirement mark.
Mm.
And I think that it is important to talk about those transitions,
It,
of
it
what it's
is.
like to go, from this family oriented job where all of a sudden you feel like you're out on an island. And that was something that we talked about a lot in peer support was,
Mm.
the first 6 months of retiring, no matter what your circumstances, is always the hardest. because you go through about 3-4 weeks and you're like, cool, I'm on this really long vacation, and then it kind of starts to settle in that this isn't vacation, this is your life
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Your routine's completely screwed
Mhm.
up. Most of us, I would probably say, our close circle are also first responders.
Mhm.
So then you go, okay, I'm not seeing my close friends anymore. You kind of stop hearing from people, they stop hearing from you. You blink your eyes, a year's gone by, and you haven't talked to somebody who on your very last day you could have sworn was your best friend. That's a whole nother layer,
Oh,
to sift through.
yes.
And it's
Yeah.
just interesting that those things aren't talked about. But I think that you're right on with saying that those transitions do need to be talked about.
Yeah. I developed a class called Wrestling the Gator of Fire Service Retirement, to address these type of things. And I had brought this up to our peer support team and to Teresa, a few years before I retired, saying, hey, there's nothing out there that prepares us for retirement, from, this career here. And I think the military might do a little bit better job. And I mean, I didn't retire from the military. I was medically separated myself from the military, for I had 9 years. And at that 9 year mark, it's like, well, another just 11 more and I'll hit my 20. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my son-in-law, he's retiring from the Air Force this year. He'll have
Oh, wow.
22 years.
Wow.
And, so as much as he's ready to retire, I know there's going to be that time, like you just said. It's like, oh, wow, I don't have this
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And it's really a big deal. And have you ever read the book Left of Bang?
Mm-mm. No, I haven't.
It was written by a couple Marine Corps officers. And the overall context of the book, and it came out of some of the incidents, in combat from Iraq and Afghanistan, is bang is the incident.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're right of bang, you're reacting to it. Left of bang is preparing ahead of time so that you can either prevent it, you can see it coming, and when it occurs, you're prepared for it. And so what we're talking about right here, a sudden departure from emergency services or a retirement, that's the bang. And we really need to be left of bang and working in that area, to help
Yes.
people. And also the identity piece. And Hannah,
Yes.
you and I as Christians, we know we have an identity in Christ, and it's real easy to say that until we're no longer wearing a uniform.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's
Yep.
like you
Absolutely.
hit on it. It's like, man, yeah, I'm not wearing a uniform.
And I spent all those years preaching to people, don't worry, don't worry. Your identity is not your uniform. Your identity is not your
Mhm.
badge. Your identity is not this career. And the first couple weeks that I wasn't walking around with a gun on my hip, I'm thinking, who am I?
Right.
And
What purpose do I have?
yes. And in the back of my head, I'm like, listen to yourself, listen to yourself, listen to all the advice you've been telling other people. But then you put yourself in the position, and all of a sudden you're like, nope, I'm not listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Like, I think I've kind of heard that here in my own house.
Maybe we're stubborn. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. 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 Because yeah, stubborn. I thought about that when you were talking about the injuries. How many, you know, firefighters, police officers walk around with injuries
Oh my gosh.
because you don't want to go off on, oh man,
Yep.
you don't want to get sentenced to light duty.
No.
Hell, I've been there. It
Yep.
stinks. And I know the workers' comp doctors because I would have our guys come back that had just come from workers' comp and they say they don't understand us. Yeah, because they're working with people in other professions that, oh, I want to stay off longer. I want to stay off longer. Here we are.
Yeah.
Get me back, get me back, get me
Completely
back.
opposite.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Hannah, as we're wrapping this up, I appreciate your time. Tell people who are in our area within driving distance about Colorado Coffee and where you are located.
Yeah, so we have two stores. The first one is kind of the OG original store, which is going to be attached to the First National Bank. This is where you were most likely going to be found at,
Hmm.
like, I don't
Yep,
know,
yep. That's,
4 days out of the
yeah,
week, you'll
that's
be
my
there.
that's mostly my hangout. Yeah.
So that one's at Boyd Lake in 34. And then our second location is over at the Foundry, and we're right next to Vato's Tacos, downtown Loveland.
Yeah. And folks, it's really good. And recently I was over there, Hannah, and I was Carol was going to give me my usual, and then she mentioned the Kenyan
Yes.
coffee. And I
Yes.
said, whoa, wait a minute, change. I'll take that. And Nick and Rebecca had gotten me a gift certificate for Christmas. And so I used that to get a pound of Kenyan coffee. And the funny thing is, well, Deb and I run the singles group in our
Okay.
church. And we have a fella in there. His name's Simon. And Simon's from Kenya.
Oh
And so,
my gosh.
yeah. And so when I got home, I took a picture of the label and texted it to him. And then he says, what region of Kenya did that come from? I was like, I don't know.
Oh crap, me neither. Oh, that's awesome.
So,
Yes, that's
yeah.
our new
Hey,
blend and it's so good.
so, folks, you're up in Northern Colorado area. Swing. What are the hours, by the way?
Oh yes. So Foundry is open Monday through Saturday, 6 to 3, as well as Centera. But the
Mm.
Foundry is also open Sundays, 8 to 1, but Centera is
Oh,
closed on Sundays.
okay. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, the firefighters, police officers listening out there want to come by and just, jaw jack and swap war stories.
Yes.
You're liable
You
to
will
find
likely
somebody there.
you will likely see me or my children running around.
So, Hannah, is there anything else that you would like to add as we're wrapping this up?
No, I'm just so grateful. For those who don't know, I had no idea that Rick did this podcast until, just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you saw me when I was in there and asked if I'd be on it. And I was floored because I told him immediately, I said, well, I don't have a cool story. And he's like, yes, you do. So I appreciate you encouraging me to kind of step out of
You're
my
welcome.
shell and my norm and share what I can with everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, it is a cool story. The fellow that I was on with this morning, John, when he was asking me different things, he says, "Man, Ricky says you got so many stories."
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they could go on and on and
Oh
on, and
yes.
some of them that we would share off mic, off camera
Yes.
ourselves that we won't share here with the rest of the world
Exactly. You'll have to
because
come into the shop for a cup of coffee to hear those stories.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. My wife will remind me sometimes when I'm getting ready to teach the singles group, she'll say, just remember your audience.
Thanks, honey.
Yeah. Well, Hannah, thanks a lot. And folks, this is Firehouse Talks with Jersey Rick, igniting leadership excellence. If you like this episode, please subscribe and like. And in the show notes, you'll find my email and my website as well. Please reach out because I got a heart for firefighters, got a heart for police officers as well. And I'm going to continue to serve in the emergency services community until God either takes me home or I just can't hobble around anymore. So, Hannah, thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we'll see everybody later.
Thank you.